There's a moment you've experienced, but probably never named. You're talking to someone. They're smiling. They're saying all the right things, but something feels off. You can't explain it. You just sense it. A flicker in their expression, a pause that lasts a second too long, a laugh that sounds hollow. You're not imagining it. You're picking up on something real. Most people ignore these signals. They trust the words. They believe the surface. But you've always suspected there was more happening underneath. There is. And once you learn to see it, everything changes. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about gaining power over anyone. It's about finally understanding what people are actually communicating. The unspoken language that runs beneath every conversation, every reaction, every relationship you've ever had. And here's what makes this different. The same patterns you'll recognize in others exist in you too. This isn't just about reading people. It's about finally understanding yourself. From childhood, you learned that certain parts of you were acceptable and others weren't. Maybe emotions got you punished. Maybe vulnerability got you mocked. Maybe being too loud or too quiet made people uncomfortable. So you adapted. You built a version of yourself that felt safer. We all did. The problem is, most people forget they're wearing armor. They think the performance is who they are. The confident exterior becomes so familiar, they forget the fear underneath. The people-pleasing becomes so automatic they lose touch with their own needs. This is why surface impressions are almost always wrong. The person who seems intimidating might be terrified of rejection. The one who never stops talking might be desperate to feel heard. The one who seems cold and detached might have learned early that caring leads to pain. When you understand that almost everyone is performing a version of themselves they hope will be accepted, you stop taking their behavior personally. You start seeing the protection instead of the person. And that's where real understanding begins. Pay attention to what makes someone disproportionately angry. Not mild irritation, the reactions that seem too strong for the situation. When someone repeatedly criticizes a specific trait in others, they're often fighting that same trait in themselves. The person who can't stop pointing out arrogance in others is likely battling their own ego in private. The one who attacks people for being too emotional is probably terrified of their own feelings. This isn't hypocrisy, it's projection. One of the mind's oldest defense mechanisms. We reject in others what we can't accept in ourselves. This works in reverse too. The qualities someone admires obsessively often reveal what they feel they lack. Constant praise for confidence might signal deep insecurity. Fascination with freedom might indicate feeling trapped. People tell you exactly who they are through their judgments. You just have to listen differently. There's a pattern you'll notice once you start paying attention. The person who constantly posts about their perfect life is often struggling privately. The one who always dominates conversations rarely feels truly heard. The one who aggressively displays certainty is usually drowning in doubt. Volume is compensation. When someone is at peace with themselves, they don't need external validation to feel real. They don't need to perform their happiness. They don't need to announce their confidence. But when someone is fractured inside, they turn up the volume outside, hoping the noise will drown out the emptiness. This doesn't mean every expressive person is hiding pain, but when the expression feels forced, when it demands attention rather than naturally receiving it, when it seems designed for an audience, that's when you're seeing armor, not authenticity. Real peace is quiet. It doesn't perform. It simply exists. If you want to understand someone's behavior, stop asking what they want. Start asking what they're afraid of losing. Most human action isn't driven by desire. It's driven by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen, fear of being invisible. The person who can't say no is often terrified of abandonment. The one who works obsessively might be running from a feeling of worthlessness. The one who pushes everyone away might be protecting themselves from inevitable disappointment. When you trace behavior back to fear, people become readable, not predictable. Humans are too complex for that, but understandable. And something strange happens when you start seeing fear instead of hostility, protection instead of aggression. You stop reacting and start recognizing. You realize that most difficult behavior isn't personal, it's survival. Language is controlled, edited, rehearsed, but the body leaks truth constantly. The watch for the micro expressions, the flash of discomfort before someone agrees, the tension in shoulders when a certain topic surfaces, the way eyes shift when a question gets too close. Notice what subjects people avoid. Notice when their energy changes. Notice the difference between a genuine laugh and a performed one. Silence is information. Deflection is information. The topics someone never brings up are often the ones that matter most. You don't need to be a psychologist to see this. You just need to stop focusing exclusively on words and start noticing everything else. The body doesn't know how to lie as well as the mouth does. Some people need to manage everything, every detail, every outcome, every person in their environment. On the surface, it looks like strength. Underneath, it's usually terror. When someone's inner world feels chaotic, they grip the outer world tighter. If they can just control enough variables, maybe they can prevent the collapse they secretly fear. This is why controlling behavior often intensifies during stress. The person isn't becoming more difficult, they're becoming more afraid. And this extends beyond obvious control. Perfectionism is control. Chronic criticism is control. Never delegating, never trusting, never allowing uncertainty. All forms of trying to manage a world that feels threatening. When you recognize this, controlling people become less intimidating. You're not seeing strength. You're seeing someone desperately trying to hold themselves together. People don't respond to you. They respond to patterns. Someone who was abandoned will see abandonment everywhere, even where it doesn't exist. Someone who was criticized constantly will hear criticism and neutral feedback. Someone who was never allowed to be wrong will react to small mistakes like catastrophes. This isn't conscious. It's the nervous system running old programs, trying to protect against old threats. When someone's reaction seems too big for the situation, they're usually not reacting to the situation. They're reacting to something from years ago that got triggered in the present. This changes how you interpret conflict. That disproportionate response isn't about you, it's about a wound you accidentally touched. And while it doesn't excuse harmful behavior, understanding this origin helps you stop absorbing it as personal attack. If you want to know someone, don't listen to their explanations. Watch their patterns. The person who disappears when intimacy deepens. The one who starts fights right before things get good. The one who commits to everything but follows through on nothing. These aren't random behaviors. They're repeated solutions to emotional problems. They're saying, this is how I protect myself. This is what I'm afraid of. This is the story I keep living. Patterns don't lie. They can't. They're too consistent. And once you learn to read them, you hear the confession underneath the behavior. This is why people repeat the same relationship dynamics, the same career obstacles, the same conflicts with different faces. They're not unlucky. They're rerunning the only program they know. Here's the part most people avoid. Every pattern you recognize in others exists somewhere in you. Every judgment you make reveals something about your own fears. Every behavior that triggers you points to something unresolved in your own story. Reading people isn't just about understanding them. It's about catching your own reflections. The traits that bother you most in others are often the traits you've suppressed in yourself. The qualities you admire most are often the parts of yourself you haven't given permission to express. This is uncomfortable, but it's also where real growth begins. Because once you see yourself clearly, other people become less threatening. You stop needing them to be different. You stop personalizing their behavior. You start responding instead of reacting. There's a risk in learning to read people. You can become cynical. You can start reducing everyone to their wounds, their defenses, their patterns. But that misses the point entirely. Understanding psychology isn't about gaining advantage. It's about gaining compassion. When you see the fear behind the arrogance, the loneliness behind the performance, the childhood behind the dysfunction, you don't become harder. You become more human. Everyone you meet is carrying something they don't know how to put down. Everyone is navigating damage they didn't choose. Everyone is performing a role they learned before they were old enough to question it. Seeing this clearly doesn't make you superior. It makes you kinder. If any of this felt familiar, if you saw yourself in these patterns or recognized someone you've never quite understood, this is just the surface. There's more underneath. There always is.